Today on the Shrewd Dudes podcast, we have some interesting videos about some climate activists in France. And you know what? The way that the French deal with their protesters is just magnifique. Magnifique. You're going to want to show you that. Brazil, apparently they don't take cheating sitting down. Apparently the military over there is not taking any prisoners, literally. We're going to talk about that craziness. Elon Musk, of course, has taken the world by storm. Twitter files, revelations. It has gone nuclear, and the left is either ignoring it, pretending like it's nothing burger, or freaking out like it's the end of the world and we're all going to die. Well, we're gonna have to cover that part. In some COVID-related news, vaccines not useful at all if you're a young person. Who knew? But also the whole lab leak thing looking a little bit more for sure. It's amazing how we just called this kind of stuff early. And finally, in Canada, our dictator in chief has decided that you don't get no guns. No, because you bad. All of that and so much more today on the Shrewd Dudes podcast.
Alrighty. So, today we're having a bit of an impromptu live stream just because we're making sure everything is good to go for Thursday.
Because Steven's computer is having all sorts of little spaz and
it's reacting seizures. Poorly
little
to
seizures.
The streaming software.
Yeah, little XSplit seizures.
Exactly.
And so Steven's camera has also gone a little weird because it's making him blue. Exactly. He's a Smurf today. Steven's officially a Smurf.
Yeah, I have Smurfed all over the place.
Or he's going to turn into a blueberry like Willy Wonka.
I'm thinking about eating things. I'm remembering the food that my wife made today. Oh, so good.
Oh yeah, yeah.
She made stewed pork shoulder.
Stephanie is a good cook.
I'll give her that. She's fantastic. Cook. Anyways, so as I said, today is a live stream. If you're watching the live stream, participate in the chat. Whatever. It's going to be a chill day. We're not going to have crazy sections like we usually do. It's just Tuesday News Day. And Tuesday News Day, it's a whole bunch of stories from everything that happened over the weekend. So if you're here, chime in. We would love to take your chat and engage with you. That being said, before we jump into any of the stories, Danny, how was anything you did over the weekend or everything?
Uh-oh.
What's the uh-oh? It's not on my end. Danny? Nanny? Hello? I don't know what happened. Anyways, I shall continue. I shall detail the stories of my weekend for everybody who wanted to know. Which is probably just a couple of people, but hello! So, I don't know what Danny's doing. Don't know what he's saying. Don't know why things are weird on his end, but okay.
Well, you suddenly went blank. I didn't know what happened.
I'm still here.
I thought computer crashed.
Nope. We're still going. We're still going strong. You just walked off, and I was like, all right, I'll do the show solo. Screw Danny.
Weird. I don't know. I every time that you crashed in before, all I got is the spinning kind of the two dots.
No. Everything is good on my end. Everything is good on my end.
Okay. Your screen share. I'm not seeing anything on your screen share. For some reason.
Maybe
you can stop it and share it again.
Maybe because I just need to click on it.
Not loading.
Not loading?
Nope. I'm just getting the two little dots.
Okay, well.
It's kind of like those dots from It. You ever seen It? When he has the three, the weird, he opens his mouth and you see these lights swirling?
Everything is good on my end, so.
Okay. now. I could see. I could see.
Well, yeah, that's probably not for the best. So, quick details of my weekend. Basically, got a new
half-blind heckler here.
Yeah, got a new phone because my phone had terrible reception and was not working properly. So, got a new phone, and I'm paying less, which is kind of interesting.
Congratulations.
Because Shaw, when you bundle, because you can have more than one account, more than one phone on the account.
Yeah, just like a family plan.
Yeah, it's a family plan. But if you get... Yeah. So, like, for... My internet speed went up again.
Mm-hmm.
So now I have 1.5 gigs per second.
Well done.
Which is more than my cables can tolerate. Like my Ethernet cables, which are like, oh yes, Ethernet cables, or Ethernet is better than Wi-Fi. And I'm like, technically not this time. Because my Ethernet cables can only handle 1 gig, whereas my Wi-Fi on my phone can handle like 1400. So it's like, wow. Oh, my phone has Wi-Fi speeds of like 1300 megabits per second. I'm like, why would I ever need that?
A lot of phones have ridiculous amounts of like, a processing power, like way more than some computers. So
yeah,
not terribly shocked by that.
I'm like, that's kind of cool.
Congratulations.
Yeah. And so
now you can be a phone snob. You can like brag about your phone in front of your like friends. Be like, oh, you have what it does.
I wish that I had a Samsung still.
Oh.
Because I do not like the interface with Google.
Samsung snob.
Samsungs are just better.
Yeah. I mean, especially if you're used to it, like it makes sense to you. So,
well,
getting into
because there's no back button, there's no home button.
Mm-hmm.
Like everything is like swipe up, swipe left, swipe right.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, just give me my buttons.
It takes a lot of getting used to. I can see that.
And Samsung has more customization.
Mm-hmm.
Google is like, do you wish to change the color? And I'm like, no.
Well, seeing as this is like a political, like, talk show rather than like a phone show, let's talk about
rant about Google.
That's right. It's Google ranty.
Google's political. It counts.
All right. So tell us what's going on this week, man. What did we miss? What did people miss this weekend?
Well, so first off, we're going to start with this video about climate protesters in France.
Mm-hmm.
I shall do it in the French accent.
Vive la France.
No, down with France.
Oh,
the French gave us Quebec, and Quebec sucks dick.
You are the greatest. You're going to be my little love bun.
Videos, climate protesters thrown around like rag dolls by angry French motorists.
Oh,
and the police aren't like piecing around with them either. Everyday French people. Let me talk, man. You silly English Mexican swine.
You talk too slow.
Everyday French people have had enough with climate protesters sitting in the road and blocking traffic, as the following footage shows. Just like in Britain, people trying to drive to work are sick and tired of their daily commute being continually disrupted by people in orange vests crowing about the world ending in 800 days and gluing themselves to the road.
Mm-hmm.
So let's watch.
I like how somebody actually called this guy Obelisk from like Tintin from Asterix. And I was like, yep, I can see it. Watch this guy. He won't mess around. Off he goes.
He reminds... Okay.
Off you go.
She's like, nope, I'm lying down.
Don't you even think about going back on there.
He kicks them. You're next.
Let's go. You're coming next. Here comes another guy.
He's like, you're going to.
Yeah, off you go, bro. Off you go. To the gutter with you.
You're good to go.
These idiots just killed him.
They're like, all right, we'll help him.
You got dog barking at him. Yep. To the gutter with you. See, that was great.
That was truly great. That's how the railway protest should have happened, and that's how the protest in Edmonton
should happen.
Yes.
Every freaking protest with these idiots like sit on the road.
Yep.
Like, I hate how here in the United States and Canada, if you touch them, you're suddenly the bad guy.
Oh,
I'm like, no,
you're guilty of assault and you basically are hauled off.
Oh, these idiots are the ones that are like causing like disruptions to the roads. I'm like, you would cause people not to get angry if the police showed up instantly and grabbed them and like dragged them off the road.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody would have a problem with these idiots if the police actually did that. But no, the police show up and like, oh, well, it's for a good cause. I'm like, give me a freaking break. Get out, give me your badge.
Well, and of course, like you look at how like the Canadian police services respond to climate protesters, and then you see how they respond to the trucker convoy. It's like, well, the trucker convoy, like they had a far more legitimate reason to be there, and they were trying to communicate with police services and with authorities saying, okay, like let's figure out routes so that traffic can get by if they need to get by. Like, of course, around Parliament Hill wasn't going to happen, but in Coots and in Windsor, they allowed it to happen because they're like, yeah, we get it. People want to cross. We're not trying to block people from crossing. We're just trying to make our stand. Whereas these people are like, no, we have to block people from crossing because it's bad for the environment. It's all just nonsensical propaganda, and the Canadian authorities just allow it to happen because they have an agenda that they have to enforce. It's not the law; it's an agenda.
The problem with these people is that it's not that you're not allowed to protest. Is that the problem is that their protests are not protests? They're basically like public. They're basically become a public nuisance. Is what they do. And they get away with it, but like I said, there's just a bunch of like retarded idiots. Like these are like kids who have nothing else to do in their lives. They have nothing else going on in their lives, and so they decide to go on the road and block people off. Can you play one of the other videos?
Yeah,
there's another one too.
Oh, I only ever watched the first one.
Oh, it's so satisfying to watch these idiots get like dragged off. There you go.
Off just you like go, off you go.
And here's the thing about them, like they get dragged off, and as soon as you let them go, they just weasel back and go right back to their old spot.
Like and that guy's like, no, you don't.
Yeah. No, you stay over here. That's what they do. They weasel back to their old spots. Like they try to be non-violent. You know what would be really nice? If you can get like somebody like Yokozuna from like wrestling, or like like the Big Show, and just drag them off the road and sit on them. Literally sit on their face and be like, nope, you're gonna stay here. You're not going anywhere, buddy. I'm not assaulting you. I'm literally just kind of making sure.
I'm doing a citizen's arrest and I'm detaining you.
I am literally like doing a public service right now to like half the pop. If I was actually like on a pedestrian and I walked across like that kind of idiocy, I would literally grab one of those idiots, like drag them off the road and just sit on them. Be like, no, you're not going back. Sorry, you're gonna stay here. Because you're literally causing a public nuisance.
Yes, you are.
And like it's absolutely like insane that people don't do it. So bravo, France. Bravo, French people, because this is one of the things where I'm like, I will.
This is the one time, France.
Well,
this is the one time.
It's like that protest where those two idiots decided to get on top of a subway train and completely make it so that nobody can go anywhere. And then finally, somebody climbed up there, pushed those idiots off, and they got beat to shreds by the crowd. I'm like, I hate to say it,
but you
kind of had that coming. You kind of had that coming.
You do.
Because this is like peak entitlement, where you feel 100%. Like you can do whatever you want, and it's like those kids who are like, you go like you see those parents and they have those kids have little tantrums, complete meltdowns in the middle of the shopping center. They're little spoiled brats. These people are no different. It's like, oh, we're gonna walk in, basically cause a gigantic nuisance to everyone around us, and no one's gonna do anything. This is how entitled these people are. But you walk into a store wearing a mask, and suddenly, like, they will call every policeman in town to come arrest you because you've become the ultimate, like, a nuisance. It's like, no, you're literally just minding your own business, walking around without a mask, but that's a capital crime.
Yeah.
But these people actually, like, causing like actual problems, that's not a crime. Good job, friends. You know what? I'm a fan of that. Good job.
Indeed.
All right,
indeed. Something that we are not so much a fan of is, so we had to give a quick rundown of the Georgia Senate results. Apparently, they have pretty much all the results in tonight, which surprising, considering everybody was like, "Oh yes, now the results are going to be in tonight." It's like, okay, so apparently they have 95% of the results in, and it's
dead heat.
Well, Warnock has been declared the winner because he has a 30,000 vote lead with 5% remaining. So, don't know.
Like, I mean, it's close.
It's close. That's
a lot closer than I thought it would be.
Yeah? Were you thinking that Warnock would walk away with it?
I legitimately thought that Warnock pretty much had it. I saw a lot of different talking points about how, runoffs tend to favor Democrats.
Yep.
Republicans are not very, I don't know, they're not very big when it comes to runoff elections. They tend to be a little bit like more squirrely. I also remembered last time, like during 2020, the runoff was like a cakewalk for Warnock. Or yeah, I think it was Warnock. So yep. I just didn't have much.
Well, and
like high hopes.
Here's the results. Like every single county has a change towards Democrats by between like 5 to 10%. So that's big.
I mean, yeah, and that's for Democrats, right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Like, I mean, you normally would, I don't know, you normally wouldn't see such a like razor thin result. Like this is 1.6 million votes for each candidate.
Yeah.
And the difference is only 30,000. Like, man, Georgia is razor thin when it comes to their elections. Like, geez.
Yep. So
we'll see.
Yep, we will see. Another thing which we're going to be watching is Brazil.
You should probably start with this Gateway Pundit story.
Okay, so Brazil military kills Red Command cartel leaders, prepares takeover. So Gateway Pundit and Mac Tiermund on War Room were the first worldwide to report that the Brazilian military is mobilizing under its constitutional authority to protect democracy. Sources on the ground now confirm that the army is mobilizing and has eliminated key leaders of the communist allied drug cartels in Rio.
Dude, that is big.
That's massive. In an unusual step for the military, the army has invaded favelas of Rio de Janeiro and killed top leaders of the Comando Vermelho drug cartel, which supports the communist criminal Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Observers take this to indicate the beginning of a federal military intervention. The drug gangs were the only ones to celebrate the alleged election victory by criminal Lula in October. Firing automatic weapons in the air in the favelas, President Bolsonaro cracked down hard on the Brazilian drug gangs. The heads of drug trafficking of Moro do Juramento and Juramentino, identified as Rodrigo Barbosa Marino, known as Rolina or Titio Rolina, and Havelton Nascimento Jr., the bad boy, respectively, were killed during a military police operation in Vicente de Carvalho on Thursday, the 1st. 3 other suspects died in the action, and one, who was also injured, is imprisoned in custody in the hospital. The drug cartels of the armed wing of the communists, Comando Vermelho, controls parts of Rio and was formed in 1979 as an alliance between the cartels and the communists. If they are eliminated, the risk of a civil war will be significantly reduced. All right. See,
Mm-hmm.
I had just read the title and I was like, oh, dang, like he's taking out like members of the government. It's like, no, he's taking out cartel leaders who are also members of the government.
Well, in Brazil, cartel leaders are...
Well, yeah, they
cartel,
are. The cartel and the communists are hand in hand.
Yes, they're very much like, connected. It would basically be like Mexico, like government leaders allied with the cartels. That's basically what it would be like. Because in Mexico, the cartels are very powerful, just like they are in Brazil. This is interesting though, because I remember reading the story a little bit when it first came out. Apparently, Brazil has an actual place in their constitution that allows the army to basically go in and restore order when there's like a real danger of political instability or something like that, and which there is. And so the most of the protests that have happened in the country have focused in exclusively on trying to get the military to actually mobilize. And it's looking like another part of the story is that apparently the court, like the Supreme Court, I think it was, the Superior Electoral Court, was trying to move the date to certify the elections from December 19th to December 12th, like basically almost like a full week earlier.
Yeah.
So it sounds like, from what we're hearing, it sounds like there's a lot of allegations and possibly a lot of evidence of some shenanigans in this election, like really serious allegations, to the point where people are convinced that Bolsonaro was completely and totally robbed, and that there was some shenanigans, some really serious problems in the election. Now, they're trying to get this election certified as quickly as possible, because the faster they can do it, the more they can legitimize their basically their illegitimate government. But it sounds like the military is actually mobilizing, and they are definitely in the favor of Bolsonaro. And in particular, like I remember, like there was a story, and I think it's in the Rumble story that comes next, that there were some very seriously high-ranking like officials, like military officials, who were saying like, yeah, this thing is not cool, not legit, and it's showing some real. Brazil is looking to be a very interesting example of a government that does not put up with with fake elections or potentially rigged elections. So yeah, play the video. This was an interesting interview. Might have some ads.
Might have some ads because it's Rumble.
Good old Rumble. To be fair, YouTube's the same. They're just disabled.
Well, Rumble takes longer to load though.
Well, in Brazil, you've got a private sector media that is so hard left in the bag for Lula, and people don't talk about how much money they made during Lula and Dilma's terms and how they're well positioned to do so again should he come in. That doesn't get reported on near enough. And then the independent right-wing media like Jovem Pan, which would be like a Brazilian Fox News, Moraes goes and censors them, fines them, restricts their ability to communicate in social media, deplatforms them. So it's quite a all hands on deck from the left, using every force they can to censor and obfuscate the truth. We talked about blocking out the military audit of the ballot machines and the transparency. But the military's got a big role to play, as we discussed, with Article 142 in the Constitution, and people are begging for it. They want it. And I think the military does end up acting because they're students of the history. General Marau, who tweeted a couple Fridays ago that the Supreme Court is eviscerating the Constitution, I'm paraphrasing, when he says something like that publicly, a highly respected military leader, that is not a unilateral act. That was obviously discussed at the highest realms of the military hierarchy. Yesterday, we're talking Monday the 29th, earlier this week, there was an open letter sent to the highest ranking generals, sort of the Joint Chiefs of Staff equivalent, by 170 high ranking officers that would report to the high guard. And they said 3 points. One, the court has breached its constitutional abilities by far. The media is totally in the bag, and protesting is absolutely a right of Brazilian citizens. So now the highest ranking officers are appealing to the equivalent of the Joint Chiefs, the leadership of the military, to take action. And these military men, are not, ignorant of history. One of them tweeted the other day, this was the 77th anniversary of 1935, November 25th or 26th, 1935, where Brazilians fought away a communist insurgency. So them suggesting this is pretty big symbology, and he said, we're on guard. We will not let communists take over Brazil. Also important to note, Bolsonaro was a career military man, while Lula was a career criminal and was in bed with narco-traficantes and Marxist revolutionaries who are the equivalent of our weather underground.
Which, by the way,
pretty crazy, eh?
That is pretty nuts.
So, like, you would think normally when you hear that the military is getting involved in the results of an election, that usually sounds like a coup. That's usually what you hear. Like, Brazil, Venezuela. I think the military was a part in like some of the government takeovers there, and in other countries as well. Like here, the military is actually a vehicle to try to basically protect the country from the real coup, like the military coup, which is actually like the pro-communist forces that are in bed with the cartels that all colluded essentially to put this illegitimate government in power.
Yeah.
So it is an interesting thing. I think it would be fabulous to see, because Bolsonaro is basically the American Trump, or like the Brazilian Trump, and from everything that I've heard, like every time I've heard about, it sounds like he is an absolute he's based. Like, he is very good for the country. He was absolutely beloved by the people, and he did a lot of good for the country. Obviously, he's he's basically a gigantic thorn in the side of the power hungry elites in the country. So of course that's why they colluded against them. So I don't know. It would have been kind of nice, honestly, to see something similar to that happen in the United States, where if they had that kind of. But no, it's cool to see that Brazil actually has a way of standing up for their people when they feel they've been cheated. So yeah, good on them.
I don't know exactly how because say if this was happening the other way around, say if Bolsonaro won and then the military was under has close tie with Lula. If the military, I would say before the military, it's so hard because the Supreme Court of Brazil it's moved the election, or it's moved the certification date up, which is a very, very troubling sign for. It's oh, well, why does the Supreme Court do that? Why did they move it up? Why did they change the rules to move it before? And so that does, of course, raise questions as to whether there's implicit bias on regards to the Brazilian Supreme Court. Because these things, unfortunately, should be addressed in the courts, but cannot. Just like in Canada, it's well, these things should be addressed in the courts, but they can't. That's why in Alberta we proposed the Sovereignty Act. My brother was going against it. He's oh, the Sovereignty Act is just this. It's just going to be this massive waste of time, and it's just going to turn people away. And I'm yeah, because Nathan, you believe in the courts too much. The courts in Canada are broken.
Your brother is spoon-fed way too much CBC talking points.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because it's
all respect to him, but he is way too controlled by the state media.
Yeah, he does buy into it a little too much. So, and yeah, we were having this discussion about oh, what's the biggest problem in the churches? And I'm the churches are cowards. He's I see the biggest problem is that the churches want to be like the American church too much, and it's putting politics above God. And I'm in what way is any church in Canada like that? There is no church in Canada. The only church in Canada that I can see, which is even somewhat like that, is Pastor Archer's church, just because he's now the leader of the Alberta Independence Party.
Yeah, But that's that's a little it's a little convoluted.
Yeah.
It's not like
but
he's
I'm
trying
like,
to
this
do it
is
on
not
behalf of his church.
Yeah.
He's a Christian man who wants to make it a real change in like in the politics.
And so I'm like, like, why would you think this is a problem in Canada? I'm like, the opposite is true. Like, Canadians have been so afraid of being seen like the American churches. They're like, no, we have to completely distance ourselves from politics. And then my brother and my sister-in-law are like, well, why should we be why is this a bad thing? Like, why is the government isolating itself from the church a bad thing? Like, why are we so afraid of persecution? It'll make the church stronger. And I'm like, yes, but think of our kids.
Okay, like, the idea that we should become more cowardly so we can get more persecution.
Yeah.
I'm like, wait, what? So you want to become more cowardly, and you think that being a coward is going to make you better withstand persecution? That is like nonsensical. Right there.
I was like,
my gosh.
But if we're not acting now, like, why would we act then? Like, why would we act if the persecution is worse? Mm-hmm. And they're like, well, like, if the persecution is actual persecution, or like if it's persecution, like if they're coming after us for our faith, then like the faith of those will become stronger. And I'm like, yes, but the faith of probably 80% of Canadian Christians will fall by the wayside because they're more people pleasers than they are Christians.
I think it's worse than that. I think people who say that, I'll stand strong when it really counts. I'm like, that is the most like naive statement you could possibly make. If you say like, well, when somebody punches a gun to my head and tells me that I need to like give up my faith, then I'll stand. I'm like, yeah, good luck with that. Because if you're going to basically like cave and abandon, like and basically throw God under the bus every chance you get until the very end, good luck having that kind of courage when it really counts.
Yeah.
Like if you can't be faithful with the little things, you're not going to be faithful with things. It is such a naive way of thinking. It's just, I think really what happens is it's a way of justifying your own indifference and your own inaction.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm going to wait until it really counts. I'm like, okay.
And I'm like, okay, like think of our kids. And I'm like, do you want Canada to become like Finland, where if you oppose homosexual relationships or LGBTQ issues, then your kids are like put before a tribunal and you'll like have your kids taken away? And they're like, well, I guess that's a bad thing. And I'm like, you guess that's a bad thing? Like, that's a horrifying thing. I'm like, that's why we're like, this is such a bad thing. And why it's like we have to like we can't have Alberta become like Florida because then it'd be moving too far to the right and we wouldn't pick up the centrists. And I'm like, then abandon Canada.
Wait. Did he just like suggest that like the right is bad? Somehow?
Well, they're saying that it's like, well, we have to win this election, or we have to have the UCP win the next election. Which my brother is like, well, I don't care because I don't want Daniel Smith to win. And I'm like, so you just don't
want the NDP?
And he's like, well, I don't want the NDP either. And I'm like, what? I'm like, no, there is Daniel Smith or there is evil.
Oh boy. I swear, like it's like this is where people pleasing gets you.
Yep.
Where you feel like like we need to make people like us. I'm like, oh, good. I don't know why you signed up to be a Christian then.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. But I'm
like, this is what people ask me. It's like, why'd you leave Center Street? I'm like, that right there, that
kind of like wallflower attitude.
Yeah.
We're like, we're gonna hide when the storm comes, and rather than actually like take any actual effort to stand up at all.
Yep. But someone who is taking an effort to stand up against all the leftist craziness, surprisingly, is Elon Musk.
Well done.
So, yep. From Fox News, why efforts to dismiss Musk's Twitter files by liberal media won't work this time. The connection between Democrats and Twitter and the company's decision to censor the Hunter Biden laptop scandal will not disappear. What was that?
That was
was you like replaying a video or something?
I'm watching the live stream.
Yes.
Just to see if it's working.
Yeah, I've been keeping an eye on it. It's working well so far.
Cool.
So, in the aftermath of the release of the Twitter files, the media and political establishment appear to be taking a lesson from Karl Marx, who said history repeats itself. First as tragedy, second as farce. The censoring of the Hunter Biden scandal before the 2020 election by Twitter and others was a tragedy for our democratic system. That tragedy was not in its potential impact on a close election, but it was, but the massive and largely successful effort to bury a story to protect the Biden campaign. It has now ended in a farce, as the same censorship apologists struggle to excuse the implications of this major story. The Twitter files confirm that Twitter never had any evidence of Russian disinformation or hacking on the basis of its decision to censor the New York Post story. Indeed, some at Twitter expressed concern over preventing the sharing of the story. Former Twitter Vice President for Global Communications Brandon Borman asked that the company could truthfully claim that this is part of the policy for barring posts and suspending users. Those voices were few and quickly shouted down as the company barred the sharing of the story, including evidence of a multi-million-dollar influence peddling scheme by the Biden family. The back-channel communications between the Biden campaign and the Democratic operatives show a willing use of the company to suppress political discussion of the scandal before the election. It was an all-hands-on-deck moment for the media, and Twitter was eager to lend a hand. And, we knew this. We knew that they were suppressing the story. One of the best lines of all when it came to this issue was Ted Cruz when he was grilling Jack Dorsey. Who the hell elected you? I'm like, yeah, that's right. Because that was exactly because his grilling was exactly on point. It's like, how is this a fair election if Twitter is willing to interfere, if Facebook is willing to interfere, if big tech is willing to censor stories that come out that go against one of the major players? I know that the Democratic National Committee and the Democratic Party blamed Facebook and blamed Twitter in 2016 because the email scandal hurt Hillary significantly.
Yep.
And so Facebook and Twitter are like, oh, well, we can't be blamed for this. And so as soon as the FBI came to both of them and said, yes, there's going to be some Russian interference in the election, they're like, okay, yes, master. Let's block it. And then, of course, it wasn't just collusion with the FBI. It was also collusion directly with the Democratic Party to block stories and discussion and prevent it from trending and all of the above so that people would not find out about the significance of the Hunter Biden email or laptop scandal and the connection to Joe Biden, which was very likely significant.
Yeah, I think that the significance of the Twitter files is that we know that the government tried to put pressure on the social media company. Now, if you look back to what Mark Zuckerberg said,
what the heck?
What Mark Zuckerberg said.
Sorry,
when it
started playing the video automatically.
I know. So when Mark Zuckerberg was on Joe Rogan asked him what happened, with the Hunter Biden story. And he's like, basically in a nutshell, what Mark Zuckerberg said is that they kind of came along and said Psh, by the way, just letting you know, there may be some misinformation. Just so you know, the way that Mark Zuckerberg framed it sounds like it was a good, that they were good actors trying to just do the right thing and trying to be and what the Twitter reveals shows is that no, that wasn't the case at all. The Twitter, and by all measurements, you can almost pretty much guarantee that Facebook acts the exact same way, because there was that whole reveal a while back that Facebook had a special a special way of an open link or something. What was that thing, Stephen? Where they had it open and that got the government could send their request for censorship directly to that open link or whatever. Anyways, the point is, the Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, they are all nothing more than extensions of the federal government. This is why this is a problem, because before you could make the argument this is a private company, they can do whatever they want. I don't agree with that very much, but still, you could make the argument that they're a private company. The problem is they're not acting like a private company. They are acting like a super PAC for the for the federal government, and the federal government cannot censor speech. That's the boundary that they are stuck in under the First Amendment. They cannot censor speech. They can't punish anyone for free speech. However, if they are acting and giving the companies like Twitter and companies like Facebook and companies like YouTube, if they're basically giving them marching orders and they do exactly what they're told, that means that these companies are basically acting at the behest or as an extension of the government. That means that these companies are liable for breaking First Amendment things. And that's been a big part of the conversation. A lot of left-wing media sources, they're all saying like, oh, this isn't First Amendment. This has nothing to do with the First Amendment. And it's like, well, no, you're wrong, because if the government is telling them that they have to censor stories, then they are themselves acting as an agent of the government. Hence, they can actually be sued and punished for breaking the First Amendment, right? But so this is significant because what's happening is these companies control conversations. They completely control conversations, and they basically act without any consequence. Because remember, one of the things I found out during the Twitter file leak that was really surprising is that Twitter not only prevented the story from being shared, but you couldn't even DM it. You couldn't send a message with the story link.
Yep.
And that's something that they only do for like things like child porn. But this is a completely legitimate story that they went beyond what is normal. And they even admitted they had an email from I think a congressman saying like, hey, by the way, even if this is hacked material, I don't think you have the right to censor it.
Yeah.
And to pull it back. So it's like it's right in our faces now. This is no longer speculation about shadow banning and all this other crap that they do. It is right out in the open. They are basically
rampant, blatant, and arrogant.
Yes, which is why the government and all these media, like the media lackeys, they're all trying to shift the narrative to a completely other thing, which is oh my goodness, Twitter's now become a hate speech platform. Like that's their new talking point. Like what's their goal? They want to make it sound like, oh, it's super dangerous. Hence, we now have to shut it down for your safety. Garbage.
So, from Fox Business, Musk's Twitter files reveal censorship by Hunter Biden laptop story is a distraction.
Of course it is. Yeah.
White
As
House
she provides
says,
a distraction.
Yep. As she provides the distraction. So let's just watch Karine Jean Failure.
The worst press secretary ever.
I actually like that nickname for her.
The worst press secretary ever?
No. Karine Jean Failure.
So look, we see this as an interesting or a coincidence, if I may, that he would so haphazardly, Twitter would so haphazardly push this distraction. That is a full of old news, if you think about it. And at the same time, Twitter is facing very real and very serious questions about the rising volume of anger, hate, and anti-Semitism on their platform, and how they're letting it happen. And, the president said last week, more leaders need to speak out and reject this. And it's very alarming and very dangerous.
Okay. So she's talking, she's saying hey, this is a distraction. By the way, did you know that is more hate speech now than ever? I'm like, oh, okay, so you're gonna talk about how this is a distraction while presenting your own distraction. Good job, you. And then the second thing that she says is that what was it what was the other thing that she said? The whole idea that this this is about hate speech, that I cannot stand when a government says, oh, hate speech, we have to protect you from hate speech. That is the most condescending thing a government could do or say. Be like, you poor darling, you're so sensitive and you're so stupid that you can't tell what's the truth from the lie, so we have to protect you like a little child. That is basically what the government is doing when they talk about hate speech and misinformation. They basically arguing that you are stupid and you need them to like basically like wipe your chin and cover your eyes from these like terrible things.
Lead you not to temptation, and deliver you from evil.
It's the most condescending thing ever. Like I don't understand why more people aren't annoyed by it. I'm like, it's super condescending.
It is exceptionally condescending.
You're too dumb to know what the truth is. So we have to do it for you.
Yep. But of course, according to Elon, hate speech impressions has continued to decline despite significant user growth. So yeah, Korean Jean-Pierre, your worries are unfounded. But another problem,
they're cutting down on like child porn. Did you know that?
Yep. Whereas Twitter didn't really care about that before. They were only caring about cracking down on conservatism, which conservatives don't like child porn.
Yep.
We're looking at you, Democrats.
But leftists love child porn.
Yes, they do.
Like it is a little bit alarming how much the CIA got busted with like way too many people in the CIA had like child porn. I was like,
really messed up. Really, really messed up. Anyways, so other things that were messed up. The Twitter files compromised after the lawyer involved in the controversy was behind vetting the files.
Whoops.
Yep. So Elon Musk released internal company communications through Matt Taibbi on Friday, but the company's censorship of the New York Post Hunter Biden laptop story. Contained in the batch of files was an email from former Twitter Deputy General Counsel Jim Baker about how the company should handle the Hunter Biden laptop story. Quote, I support the conclusion that we need more facts to assert whether the materials were hacked, he said in the email. At this stage, however, it is reasonable for us to assume that there may have been and that caution is warranted. There are some facts that indicate the materials may have been hacked, while there are others indicating that the computer was either abandoned or the owner consented to allow the repair shop to access it for at least some purposes. We simply need more information.
Liar!
Taibbi failed to mention in the initial release that Baker was the former FBI general counsel involved in the Russia-related investigations into former President Donald Trump. Yeah, the next installment of the Twitter files was supposed to happen over the weekend, but became delayed for a reason that is unknown at the time. So Taibbi now says the reason for the delay that it was discovered that Baker was responsible for vetting the files that were released to him and journalist Barry Weiss. And of course, Musk immediately fired Baker upon hearing the news.
You're fired.
In light of concerns about Baker's possible role in suppression of information important to the public dialogue, he was exited from Twitter today. Musk tweeted. He tweets people's firings. It's so funny.
No, that's great. That's great. I love it. I love like the Musk is just like literally cleaning house.
Yeah,
it's like going into a house and like kicking out the rats. Like, well, there's one rat. There's another rat.
I love the Twitter employees that try to air the dirty laundry, and it's just like, you realize you don't have a job now, right? And it's like, what? And it's like, yeah, no, you're fired. Because I'm your boss.
Did you know the Parag Agrawal? I remember hearing somebody say that he still hasn't found another job.
Oh my gosh!
Dang, the CEO
that is
of Twitter,
great.
He still hasn't found another job. Like that's sad. Shows you a lot about these Twitter twits.
Yep.
Who like live like the life free.
Yep. So it's a little premature, but I think I could safely say the Leafs are going to win tonight.
No, well, thank you for sharing information that nobody else cares.
Shut up.
Anyway, let's go to Axios.
They're the most popular team in the NHL. They have millions and millions of supporters around the world.
Literally just because of numbers, not because it's like, like true.
They're the most dedicated fans in all of hockey. They will follow through thick and thin because we have not won a cup in over 50 years.
Okay, Korean Jean-Pierre with your distractions. Let's move on to That's right. I went there.
You're dead to me.
You'd better keep going if you don't want me to keep going. Off now well again.
All right, from Axios, end of story.
Ooh.
Elon Musk responds to Trump's Twitter files reaction.
Unnecessarily long pause for that.
I know. Well, no, I have to get used to using the new XSplit because I sometimes forget to switch from commentary to stories. So I have to remind myself to do that.
Well, Steven.
So now everybody can see what I'm reading. Twitter owner and CEO Elon Musk doesn't appear to be a fan of former President Trump's response to the Twitter files released last week. So the Constitution is greater than any president, Musk tweeted in response to the Fox News article on Trump calling to toss out part of the Constitution. End of story. Twitter files we already covered.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, I'm not agreeing with this statement, of course, because everybody who's followed the channel knows how we feel about the election. We can't say how we feel about the election because otherwise YouTube will censor us.
It's like the one thing we can't talk about.
Yeah, one thing we can't talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Totally safe, totally secure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But,
but what we can't talk about, Stephen, what we can talk about is that muffin sale and who won the prize at the muffin sale. I'm thinking that muffin sale was less than
was a little dodgy.
Little dodgy. That muffin sale was really dodgy.
Yeah. You know? Now, of course, thinking, the Twitter information, yes, it makes it so that it's ever more clear that the muffin sale was illegitimate.
Mm-hmm.
However, at this point in time, what Trump is suggesting to do with the muffin sale is legally impossible.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be a better reaction to be like, okay, well, now we know. It's like, now that this is absolutely certain that the muffin sale was problematic, can we actually have legitimate investigations into the muffin sale?
I think we should.
I think we should have legitimate investigations into the muffins. Like, can we have the Supreme Court look into the muffin sale? Like they should have done prior to the certification of the muffin sale?
Works,
I'm loving this.
Very much works.
The muffin sale.
The muffin sale. I'm thinking somebody put some stuff in those muffins that wasn't right. You know, somebody miscounted the muffins. Thinking
the muffin sale.
Yeah. By the way, Stephen, can you click on the Axios symbol there on the story? I want to touch really quick on just click on the Axios, click on it. Go to the main. Because it'll take you to the main source right there. Trump's horrific month. Just really want to, because I saw this and I'm like, you know what? It goes into the Axios thing. Trump, just a little quick note. Trump has had a really crap month.
Yes, he has.
And I think we should just kind of mention that this was like the topping on a very bad month for the president. Because if you look at what happened, like, you know, to Trump, is that he basically had like the whole fiasco with Ye and Nick Fuentes that blew up in this horrible way.
Yeah.
Apparently he lost a major court battle.
Yep. His company was convicted of tax fraud this morning.
Company was convicted of tax fraud. Yeah, there was just a lot of things that went backwards for him this past month. So keep this in mind because Trump entered the race very early, and this month may be kind of detrimental to his campaign, at least right now, because a lot of people have really cooled on Donald Trump after this month. So keep that in mind. It's just it's a side story, but it's something to keep in mind. President Trump may actually be basically his own worst enemy right now.
Yep. Oh yeah.
And unfortunately, that might mean that he might be losing too much steam.
I was actually bringing this up with my family. The best time to enter the race is somewhere in the middle of the pack, because usually the people that are first to enter, usually don't win.
Yeah. You kind of have to enter early because there's factors to it.
Yeah,
but if you enter early, you also have to kind of
you have to keep your nose clean, and you have to basically like stay under the radar.
Yes,
like,
you do.
If he had gone and like had dinners with totally normal people, let's put it that way, and just played golf and managed his business entities and tried to like keep everything above water, then things would be going, and like stayed out of generalized discussion and wasn't truthing about a whole bunch of things. Then come the middle, it's like, oh, well, when necessary, Trump can stay out of it. But problem, of course, with Trump is that one of his nervous tics is that he likes to be the center of attention. And it's a problem.
Well, he tends like the thing that made him appealing to most people early on. It may actually prove to be a bit of a bit of a like a liability, too big of a liability this time around. So we'll see. But keep that in the back of your minds that Trump, let's see if Trump bounces back. But let's move on to the next story. So this is from actually The Independent, even though it's covered on Yahoo Sports somehow. Supreme Court appears to side with wedding web designer opposed to same-sex marriage. This is a big deal.
Yes.
This is like a big Supreme Court case. And it's going to have some really big implications going forward.
Yeah.
Feel free to go through it.
So the Supreme Court's conservative majority appeared sympathetic to a Christian graphic designer, argued that being forced to work with same-sex couples would violate her belief. That's not actually what she claimed. But again, this is The Independent and not a more conservative source. So
what was the actual claim, Stephen? Just so we know. Well, what did she actually claim?
So this statement that they made argued that being forced. Well, what she's actually refusing to do is that she's refusing to make a website for their their homosexual wedding websites.
Yes.
So that people can RSVP and have their gift registry. So she's like, I'm not making a website for that.
Yeah. So they're trying to frame it like you refuse to work with same-sex couples, not you refuse to work on a same-sex project.
Yeah. Which of course is the same line of argumentation as Jack Phillips, where he's like, I'll make a cake for you, but I'm not going to make a gay wedding cake. Because I'm refusing a service. I'm not refusing service.
Yeah, I'm true. Like you can provide them with a cake, but you won't do something that
violates your own conscience.
Well, because you're celebrating.
Yep.
By making a cake, you're celebrating something, promoting something that you don't agree with.
By your actions, you're involuntarily promoting it.
Yeah.
So Laurie Smith, who runs 303 Creative, argued that an adverse ruling would force religious artists to carry out work on gay weddings against their religion, which is true.
Yep.
During 2 hours of spirited arguments, the justice appears to be split down ideological lines, with 6 conservatives seeming to ally with Ms. Smith and her supporters' arguments. In one awkward moment that caused a stir on social media, Samuel Alito asked whether a ruling against Mrs. Smith hypothetically meant that a black Santa Claus would have to take a picture with a child dressed up in a KKK outfit. Justice Alito also asked whether the ruling would compel a photographer to take pictures for the marital infidelity website Ashley Madison. The 3 liberal justices raised concern that a ruling supporting Ms. Smith would result in businesses being able to discriminate against black, Jewish, or Muslim customers. The Associated Press reported. Justice Sonia Sotomayor said the court rules in Ms. Smith's favor. It would be the first time that a court had ruled that a business could refuse to serve a customer based on race, sex, religion, or sexual orientation, which is not true. But of course, it's Sotomayor, and she is a joke.
And a lot of conservatives call her really stupid because she made some really dumb arguments when when Dobbs came. She made some really dumb arguments. It was like, how are you a Supreme Court justice? It was really bad. What are your thoughts, Stephen, on the story?
I'm glad that they will decide in favor of Miss Smith.
Yep.
But it says in the article, but the article is very pro the bill because they say that it would protect same-sex and interracial marriage, when in fact what it would do, it would impose these businesses would not be allowed to refuse. Because right now, of course, it is a First Amendment issue, and right now it is an issue of religious freedom, whereas the bill, Protection of Marriage Act.
Respect for Marriage Act.
Respect for Marriage Act, yes.
What are you chewing, barbels? So I recommend people listen to Ben Shapiro's take on this. He had a really brilliant take. Basically, and I didn't understand this before. I didn't actually fully understand. What happens is in the original Constitution, you're not allowed to compel behavior.
Yep.
That was the thing. That's the freedom of association. You can associate with who you choose, and you can refuse to associate with who you don't want to associate with. That was freedom, right? But during the 1960s and 70s when they drafted the Civil Rights Act, they basically, in an effort, like a good, probably a good faith effort to try to eliminate discrimination or the ability to refuse service to people for whatever reason, they went a little too far and they basically created a rule in the law that basically essentially argued that you can't discriminate. Okay, so discrimination is bad. But what's happened is that now that you have two conflicting problems. On the one hand, the Constitution supposedly says you have a right to associate with who you choose. In other words, you have the right to choose if you want to work or not work with somebody for whatever reason. However, with the new discrimination laws, anti-discrimination laws, they're now basically making it so that, discrimination bad, and it doesn't matter what it is, all discrimination bad.
Yeah.
So the left wing activists and a lot of the activists that are arguing this case are basically realize that there's a humongous self-contradiction within the law where basically it's on the one hand you can't discriminate, on the other hand you can't violate conscience. And so the way that the justices are likely going to resolve this is they're going to say, okay, you can't discriminate except for this little section where religion. They're trying to create a box where you can discriminate as long as you're in the box of religion.
Yep.
That's basically the way that they're trying to solve this conundrum. And it's not going to hold ultimately because in order to kind of justify what the distinctions are, they have to make very arbitrary distinctions. Like, for example, are you only allowed to discriminate if you're doing art, but not if you're just making a product? Where's the line? It's what's artistic, what's not artistic. Alito was even arguing. It's okay, well, you can, there's a distinction between immutable characteristics, which is something you can't change, and something that isn't immutable, which is desires. Desires are not immutable characteristics; they're a totally different thing. Yep. All kind of distinctions that need to be made. The problem right now is that America is in a real conundrum where you have two conflicting forces. You can't discriminate, but also you can't violate conscience. And the problem is which one of these is going to is eventually rule out. What I believe is that discrimination laws are a problem entirely. The problem is discrimination laws, not the violation of conscience. Okay? Because I don't believe that you should be forced to do something that you don't want to do. But unfortunately, the government and a lot of these pro-tyranny forces, they love the no discrimination laws because they can force people to do something that they don't want to do. And that is the problem. This law is an anti-freedom. Any law that forbids discrimination of any kind is anti-freedom, and it makes the government the ethical police. Like we talk about how Iran had to it's dealing with protesters because of the morality police. Well, we want to install morality police here in North America that basically say, no, you have to do what we say or else you're going to jail. They're forcing this is forced benevolence, which is wrong. And that takes us to the next story that we want to link this to. This is from the Post Millennial. The story is inclusive Virginia restaurant cancels Christmas party after LGBTQ staff refused to serve Christians. Welcome to the double left, where some believe Jack Phillips must be forced to create a wedding cake as part of a celebration of a same-sex ceremony, but any business should be able to deny basic goods and services to those who hold biblical values around marriage. So the problem was Metzger Bar and Butchery, a Richmond, Virginia restaurant that says it prides itself on being an inclusive environment, recently canceled a reservation just 90 minutes before its scheduled time for a Christian group that they say made their female and LGBTQ staff feel uncomfortable and unsafe. Late last week, the restaurant posted an explanation on Instagram as to why they canceled the reservation. Metzger Bar and Butchery has always prided itself on being an inclusive environment for people to dine in. The statement began. In 8 years of service, we have rarely to anyone who wished to dine with us. Recently, we refused service to a group that had booked an event with us after the owners of Metzger found out it was a group of donors to a political organization that seeks to deprive women and LGBTQ plus persons of their basic human rights in Virginia. We have always refused service to anyone making our staff uncomfortable or unsafe, and this was the driving force behind our decision. Many of our staff are women and are members of the LGBTQ plus community. All of our staff are people with rights who deserve dignity and a safe work environment. So basically, this story is, hey, we don't like you. Therefore, we're not going to serve you. That's basically what they said.
Mm-hmm.
That's discrimination.
Yep.
But it's acceptable discrimination
because it's in one direction.
The way that the left works, it's like it's okay when we.
Yep.
Right. Now, if you take the law that the Supreme Court is trying to enforce, like you could argue that that law is them to have to force them to serve Christians. No, because if you understand properly how the left works, they will make laws that only work one direction. They will only punish people who are Christian, but they will never punish people who are LGBTQ or to force them to not discriminate, because they'll define it as this is not discrimination, even though they're complete and total double standard morons. Anyway, Steve, what do you think about this the double standard here?
Well, it's not surprising in any way. Right. Like anybody who has understood and watched what's been happening on the left, we can't even say they're hypocrites anymore because they don't care.
No, they don't care about them.
Because it's but we're tolerant, and we're just being bigoted against bigots, and so therefore that's not bigoted. Mm-hmm. Because we're just discriminating against the bigots, and they deserve to be incriminated, and they deserve to be in jail. There was polls. They're like, oh yeah, do you agree that people who disagree with homosexual marriage should be imprisoned? And a large segment of the people who were asked on this one, I'd have to go back and find this. It's yep, they should be imprisoned. Yeah, they should be imprisoned for disagreeing on a highly contentious issue, because that's how the left thinks about things.
Yeah,
it's disagree with me or be severely punished. Guess what? Who else thought like that? The worst dictatorial regimes in history.
Yeah, I mean, even when we were during COVID, when we had the lockdowns, do you remember how people were so willing to segregate?
Oh yeah,
and they couldn't see it. They literally couldn't see it. They're like, "Well, this is different." I'm how? And I literally walked them through it. They literally couldn't see the similarities. I'm like, I actually called more than one person a moron.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, you don't see because you don't want to see, and you're an idiot. Because you can't even figure this out. The thing that a 5-year-old could figure out, you can't figure out. That's the discrimination that people are perfectly happy with. But this is the problem with discrimination laws. Is that it's one thing to say in a society, you can't hurt that person. You can't Stephen can't go out to the street, throw a rock at somebody because he's hurting somebody. That's illegal, so we're going to punish him for breaking a law. That law is actually you're hurting someone. However, these laws are basically forced benevolence. Mm-hmm. And I oppose any law that forces people to do what the people in charge believe is a good thing. Any law that says you have to give to charity, I'm I'm against that. I like giving to charity. I think people should choose, but you not get to force people to give to charity.
Yep. Well, even churches that are forcing. There was, when we were doing our preliminary church hunting stages, there was one or two churches that are yep, in order to be a regular parishioner, you have to show evidence that you're giving this amount to the church. I'm nope. I'm that's not biblical. It's yes, we should totally be giving, but we should not be doing so out of a compulsion.
It's like Reverend whatever the guy's name on The Simpsons is like. Just a reminder, everybody.
Lovejoy.
Like Lovejoy. Yeah, Reverend Lovejoy. He's like, just a reminder, when 10% tithe is like, it's not off the top, it's the whole thing. That's gross, people, not net. Please don't force us to audit. And I was like, yeah, that
Thank you for donating to the church today.
That's right. Oh my goodness. I don't like forced benevolence of any kind.
No.
This is why I'm not in favor of anti-discrimination laws, because ultimately, like they make them sound like we're helping people do good things so people don't feel left out. I'm like, you can't force people to associate with people that they don't agree with.
Yep. If you don't like that business because they disagree with you, then go to a different one.
Yes.
It's a web designer. It's a bake shop. There are others.
Yeah.
It's not like this is a 1 in a million. And even if it was 1 in a million, then it's like, find a way.
Mm-hmm.
You do not have to force your beliefs or force others to accept you under punishment of death or having their life completely destroyed because you feel slighted.
Yeah. Now, I will say this. There's a distinction. I don't think that there should ever be a government-sponsored effort to mass discriminate.
Yeah.
Like segregation laws, I agree. The government should not be making laws that discriminate.
Yep.
Okay? But there's a very big difference between individuals.
Yes.
Individual people, individual businesses, you should not be forcing them to do
comply
something,
with
comply with whatever you want them to do. I think that's where the problem lies. So if you want to be consistent, government should not be like forcing people to comply with to do good, but individuals should not be forced to violate their own consciences. That's consistent.
Definitely. All right, we're gonna we'll finish off this section with quick reference. So, grand jury finds Virginia school bathroom rape handling worse than known, rips officials' intentional amnesia. Virginia grand jury investigating a public school district's apparent cover-up of the rape of a girl by a male student in a girl's bathroom, which made national headlines after a Daily Wire investigation, blasted school officials for their stunning lack of transparency and intentional amnesia after a much-anticipated report's released Monday. In the fact-finding report, the 9-person Loudoun County panel disclosed for the first time that a teacher's aide walked into the bathroom while a 9th-grade victim was being raped by her male classmate and saw 2 pairs of feet under the stall door but did nothing. The 91-page report called out officials for a host of lapses that continued long after the initial attack. We believe that throughout the ordeal, LCPS administrators were looking out for their own interests instead of the best interest of LCPS. This invariably led to a stunning lack of openness, transparency, and accountability both to the public and the special grand jury. They found the district concealed the nature of the attack, even as the district was preparing to impose a controversial new transgender bathroom policy. After the rape, the student was transferred to another school where he was involved in multiple incidents of misbehavior against girls that were known to officials, but until now unknown to the public, the report stated. Even the rapist's own grandmother told officials that he was a sociopath, but little was done. The rapist soon committed another sexual assault, this time in a classroom.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, we knew this. We knew part of it. We did not know.
We covered the story way back.
We covered this story way back when. We did not, of course, know about the teacher's aide. How the teacher's aide basically walked in on the rape occurring and was just like, I'm going to say nothing because that could create issues for the school.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, and covering up a rape wouldn't cause issues for the school?
Apparently not.
Are you insane?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you are. You are insane.
Mm-hmm.
Unless, like, the only rationale that I could see for that is that there was, like, a behind closed doors meeting about this student. Mm-hmm. And it's like, we cannot disclose this person's behavior because that would, of course, cause negative repercussions and homophobia and angst against the LGBTQ. So no matter what this kid does, as long as it's, like, limited to sexual assault, then we have to cover it up.
I find it interesting that do you notice this, Stephen? That and the lunatic left, anybody like from the Democrats to even liberals here in Canada and a lot of other groups across, they openly support criminality.
Yeah,
they openly do. For a really quick example, if you notice, when the left and when all these left-wing activists are in classrooms and they're basically not only advocating that you lie to parents on purpose and keep secrets from parents, but they actually try to make rules and laws in schools that basically make it so that you are not allowed to talk to parents at all. That is criminality. And they are super happy about committing crimes in order to get their way. It's a really sick part of the left. And that kind of mindset is what leads to that kind of incident and what happened there. Because everyone in that board, everyone who was left-wing and following that whole story, you knew that they were not being on it. And they were intentionally trying to cover up and trying to blame the parents and trying to be like, accuse them.
Mm-hmm.
These are criminals. These people are criminals. And they intentionally covered up. I really genuinely hope that some of the people in that whole incident go to jail.
Yeah.
There should be
there should be massive repercussions and there should be jail time.
There should be jail time. You covered up a rape.
Well, and like what do we actually know what happened to that kid?
I have no idea.
Because like
I think he got some
slap on the wrist.
I think he got some juvie time actually.
Okay, I'd have to look it up.
By the time it became obvious,
yeah, because it's like at this point, if he's not serving some time in at least some correctional facility, then like there is, even though we don't want to super advocate for it, it's like a little bit of street justice.
Well, it's. People are driven to that kind of justice when they feel that the
justice system has failed.
Like, remember that parent that we covered way back when his daughter was kidnapped by her boyfriend, and she was sold into like trafficking. And I don't know if she was found and the dad found out, or maybe she went whatever it was. But he found the boyfriend, and he literally like took him and drove him off somewhere and literally killed him. Because this guy was legitimately evil, and nobody in the law enforcement was willing to lift a finger to do anything about it.
Yep, like there are not many times in which we're advocating for street justice. That's one of them. There was another one of I think it was a teacher in Michigan, and he saw a guy looking really creepily at kids. Looked him up. He was on the sex offender registry. And it like raped 4 or 5 kids and only went to prison for like 3 or 4 years and was clearly like scouting it out to do it again. And then he went to this guy's house, put a pillow over his head and shot him in the face. And then basically admitted his guilt in an email to a local news station. And the unfortunate part was that this guy got like 50 years in prison because they're like, oh, this is first-degree homicide. It's like, well, yeah, but like this guy caused 2 kids to kill themselves, and you put him in prison for a combined like 2.5 years. That's not justice in any way.
Yeah,
he essentially killed 2 kids. We don't know how many more because the cases in which he was convicted of were like 20 years apart.
Yeah,
it's like he didn't take a break for 20 years.
Or it's like that story that we covered of those pedophile hunters in, I think it was California. They literally confronted a person who was trying to meet with like 3
kids. An underage
like
kid,
9, the youngest was like 6.
Yeah.
And this person was clearly...
It had intent,
They were hunting for like kids to like rape or something like that. And
they got in trouble.
Again, the people who were like exposing this were the ones who got in trouble, not the actual criminals that were doing the deeds. That's where you have some real problems. So
real problems. There is definitely issues with the justice system, more so in Canada.
Oh, Canada's like, we're going to talk about that later, but it's getting bad here.
It's bad all over the world.
Yeah.
Jesus, come down.
Oh, Lord, come. Take it home, Stephen.
But even Jesus can't fix the rock. No. Jesus can fix the rock. So he looks so different from when he was 30. Joe Rogan urges The Rock 50 to come clean about physique after fellow bodybuilder The Liver King was exposed for lying. He said in his podcast that Dwayne The Rock Johnson uses steroids. He urged Johnson to be honest about it after influencer Liver King was exposed. Steroids are common in Hollywood, but nobody is truthful about it, he said. So Rogan made the comment on Saturday after the internet sensation Liver King was outed as a steroid user and forced to apologize for lying to his fans that his body was natural. To justify the allegation, he suggested The Rock, who is now 50, was smaller than when he was 30, and the change couldn't have been achieved without steroids. Brian Johnson, better known as Liver King, admitted in a 6-minute video on Friday that he has done steroids in the past and is continuing to receive 0.6 mils of testosterone every week. Johnson was exposed when emails leaked in which he was trying to order steroids despite advocating to his millions of fans a diet of beef brains, bull testicles, and raw animal livers.
Lovely.
So this is, of course, a picture of The Rock uploaded to his Instagram in November and him wrestling in the WWE in 2000, age 28. And it's like, oh, well, you look way more toned at 50 than you are when you were in like the peak of your physical existence.
Yeah, go to like a image search and just type in Dwayne Johnson. Like the pictures are like it's true. I've used to watch Dwayne The Rock when he was in wrestling. And was in wrestling like yeah, he was a big guy. He was like, definitely like beefy. Dwayne Johnson muscles actually. Just to focus. Okay, so like if you go through like the pictures, this guy is jacked, and there are so many movies like where you see him, and he is a giant, like a monster, right?
Yeah,
and he constantly is like portrayed as like a beast. Like I've seen some of the what do you call it, the Fast and Furious movies.
Yeah,
that he's been in, and like the guy is like otherworldly. Like he is a whole other beast of like thing. I think that picture right there, you see it right there, where you see him like the Rock, yeah, like right there. You see him like before as he's like transforming, right?
Dang.
Yeah, so he goes from like being just like like a thin fit guy to being a guy whose muscles are ridiculous. Like what was he like 20 there? In that picture? Like he was
23 under the ring name Rocky Maivia.
Rocky Maivia before he became big as like The Rock, on thing. Then he actually went to like then he got bigger there when he's actually The Rock. Like he actually like hit big, but now he is a whole other like beast. Like he is like he keeps getting bigger. That's the thing, getting bigger. So the way that I've understood it, in order to be there's people who are strong at a certain age, but then there's like somebody who is clearly
way too
muscular.
The physique is not normal or even like semi possible at that age.
Now, the only place where steroid use is controversial is in like competition.
Is it professional sport?
No, competition. Any competition where you're competing against other, because it gives you an unfair advantage.
Yes.
Right. So if you're competing in like in the Olympics, if you're competing in any kind of like sport, like we're competing against other people, supposedly on even playing field, then yeah, you can't have steroids because they give you an unfair advantage. However, when you're talking about like people in the regular world who are not particularly in Hollywood, steroids are not controversial, nor are they even like seen as bad. The problem is that like it's pretty obvious that The Rock is clearly choosing. Why wouldn't he?
Yep.
Because it gives him more. It makes him more sellable for Hollywood. That's one of the reasons why he got the role for Black Adam. Because Black Adam's supposed to be like
he's huge.
Yeah, he's huge. So Joe Rogan is basically trying to like say like, hey, can we stop like acting like like this isn't happening? And particularly because The Rock is trying to portray himself as like just like a naturally built guy. I was like, well, no, it's almost guaranteed that he's using some form of performance enhancing thing to make himself bigger, which is fine, but like at least admit it. No, don't try to like do it. But at the same time, he's not selling something like the Liver King. Liver King was actually selling, trying to get people, supplements to get people on it. So that's a little more dishonest. But,
yes. Yeah. Anyways, we do have to move on.
Let's move it
and kind of move through these last few stories a little bit faster. We tend to do this. Alarming possibility from the Daily Caller. A COVID booster mandates will cause net harm to young adults, study claims. New study claims to show that COVID-19 booster vaccines, particularly the mRNA variety, are likely to pose a net harm to individuals aged 18 to 29. The research, published in the British Medical Journal's Journal of Medical Ethics by a team of research institutions in the US, the United Kingdom, and Canada, estimates that somewhere between 31,000 and 43,000 young adults must be vaccinated with a COVID-19 booster to prevent one hospitalization from the illness. The researchers anticipated at least 18.5 serious adverse events for each hospitalization prevented. So, basically goes over there. The authors argue that, based on their data, universities and other institutions should not be enforcing booster vaccine mandates unless it is proven that the cost-benefit scale tips in the vaccine's favor. They conducted the analysis using publicly available data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention on COVID-19 and vaccine adverse events. Our estimate shows the vaccine mandates are likely to cause net expected harms to young, healthy adults.
Mm-hmm.
This is not unexpected for us or anybody else who has been avoiding the YouTube censorship.
By the way, like I've looked at enough studies, enough major publications and experts, like from Dr. Ryan Cole to all sorts of medical experts and all that. And I've concluded that they're literally I personally, if anybody asks me, should anybody get that jab? Oh, no. I would be like, no, not even grandma. Actually, if you have grandparent or somebody who's extremely immunocompromised, they're the last person you should give those to, because they are by far the most vulnerable and the most easily susceptible to any of the adverse events adverse harms from this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, I think these jabs are the biggest public health failure in modern history.
Yep,
because they have negative efficacy across the board. You and I have looked at the numbers of all these. Every country that has instituted a mass vaccination campaign. Remember that?
Yep.
And every single country had negative efficacy.
Yep.
Their results got worse, and couple that with all the harms, it just gets bad. So, yeah, more confirmation. Thank goodness that there's just growing volume, but just don't get this thing if you can.
Yep.
Avoid it like the plague.
Avoid like the plague.
That's right. Like the worm in the tequila jar.
Yep. So, along with COVID-19 information from Rand Paul, Fauci caused 7 million people to die. We've caught him red-handed. He won't get away. It's right up there with decisions, some of them malevolent or military, to kill millions of people. Senator Rand Paul asserted Thursday that Anthony Fauci is directly responsible for funding dangerous research that likely killed millions of people and that he won't get away. There is no public health figure who has made a greater error in judgment than Dr. Fauci, declared on a Fox News appearance, adding the error of judgment was to fund gain-of-function research in a totalitarian country. He funded research that allowed them to create superviruses that in all likelihood leaked into the public and caused 7 million people to die. So, this is not anything new, per se. But, of course, Fauci his entire demeanor is, well, people don't like me, and so therefore they disagree with the science because I am the science. And so, this is his exit interview with the Washington Post. It's like, I could have made decisions better. It's not, well, I should have probably done this. This would have saved a lot of lives. It's, nope, I'm going to continue my stance because I am an arrogant douche. And of course, that's why he was the douche of the year 2 years running. So let's watch this exit interview. It's just, ugh.
You became a target and you received a number of death threats that continue to this day. What do you think about this crisis compared to others made you the target?
Well, there are a couple of issues that contributed to that, Yasmin. it was a combination of the fact that we were dealing with an absolutely unprecedented, devastating pandemic that disrupted virtually every element of society, not only in the United States, but throughout the world. That's the first background of the situation. But the thing that I think triggered it was the profound degree of divisiveness that we found ourselves involved in this country particularly. We've seen elements of it throughout the world, but the United States itself was much more deeply hit by this degree of divisiveness of an outbreak that took place in an election year in a situation that was controversial to begin with regard to the enmity that was seen between political parties that normally could function hopefully in a bipartisan way. And what we had was ideologies were spilling over into an agenda or a discussion of what should have been purely public health issues. And my being a person who's a physician, a scientist, and a public health official.
I can't.
A liar.
No,
a
I
liar.
Can't.
Yeah.
Like he's basically saying that every person disagreeing with him is doing so on a political basis and not a scientific or a medical basis.
Yeah.
What
is it?
Like, there's very few people on Earth who deserve to be in prison more than Fauci.
Yeah. This guy, so what he's doing, he's taking another tactic out of the left-wing playbook, which is basically, by the way, we're trying to save lives, and anybody, any efforts to block or to prevent us from to basically walk over all civil liberties and all that kind of stuff, it's like, you're being divisive. You're being a bad person for not letting me, not just laying down and letting us walk all over you. That's basically the playbook that they followed. And again, like I've said before, Fauci and the Collins, whatever his name was, Francis Collins, whatever, they're responsible because their guidance and their directions to the NIH of how a doctor is supposed to respond to somebody with COVID probably killed people.
Yep.
Easily. Because they told them, go home, get so sick that you're literally on the brink of death,
and
then come to the hospital,
back, and we're not going to give you anything except we're going to put you on a ventilator and hope that saves your life to the brink of death.
We're going to put you on remdesivir and all these drugs that are not going to help, and we're basically going to blame it on COVID. Like, these people, literally responsible for the deaths of millions of people. Literally. So, that can't be argued. So,
well, of course, the people that are believing Dr. Fauci and the people that are believing the medical health establishment when it came to COVID, I was chatting with this other person, and I'm like, okay, what do you have to say about the censorship of the medical community that disagrees? She's like, oh, almost all experts and doctors concur with this message. I'm like, yeah, that's because they silenced the one that disagrees. I'm like, in Alberta, we had Dr. Daniel Nagase that disagreed. She's like, Dr. Daniel Nagase was responsible for all of the ivermectin overdoses. I'm like, no,
none.
There were very few ivermectin overdoses, and there
were no ivermectin.
There were,
yeah.
But the entire reason for ivermectin overdoses, they weren't close to Dr. Daniel Nagase. They were because the access to ivermectin was basically, it was made into a controlled substance during COVID. And so the only way that people could legitimately acquire it was from a vet. And people did not check the dosage. They just took the vet, the animal horse dosage. And it's like, well, that's how you overdose on it. Because you take it in a form and in a dose that's not meant for human consumption.
I'd be curious about that, because I remember looking into the number of states, and I remember I did some real digging. I couldn't find any actual numbers of people overdosing on.
I think the report that I read said that there were 12 in Alberta.
It seems very unlikely, because ivermectin is enormously difficult to overdose from. You would have to take such insanely high quantities of ivermectin that it would have to be a colossal thing.
Let's see what the dosage is for a horse.
You basically have to take it without any thought. into measurements.
Yep.
It's very rare, and that sounds like the kind of stuff that the left would use as propaganda against ivermectin use. That really sounds like what that kind of stuff. But the reason I mention that while you're looking up, is that I remember like listening to a doctor, like a doctor who's an expert on ivermectin and like ivermectin use, Dr. Pierre Corey, who it was, and Dr. Pierre Corey was basically saying ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, like both of them, are two of the most incredibly safe drugs on the market. Like they are ridiculously safe to the point where it is very difficult. Like you would have to be intentionally like overdosing on such a high amount in order to overdose from ivermectin. Is what he was saying. So like the media was trying to argue, oh my goodness, ivermectin roof, and then they actually looked into some of them and was like, yeah, no, like those would be like fringe cases at best. It seems I don't think it passes the sniff test, because that's the kind of thing that people argue when they don't actually know about like how safe ivermectin actually is. So it seems unlikely to me. It doesn't. I'd be very skeptical about whether or not that was actually like a thing, like that many overdoses. Cause I can't even find any overdoses in the States.
Yeah,
so I'd be very surprised.
You'd have to basically take because the horse dosage is massive. Is basically 113 grams of ivermectin, because the horse dosage is 200 micrograms or 91 micrograms per pound. So 91 micrograms per pound, and this is for an average of a 1,250 pound horse.
Yeah.
Whereas a human, we get like it's a higher dose per pound. It's like 180 micrograms per pound, but average.
For a person,
it's like more than 2 times like the high dosage.
I mean, we can look this up later if you want. Yeah. But all I'm trying to say is that the argument that whoever that person was that you're having that.
Well, they did have a source for it, and the source did say that there were 12. So
yeah, it sounds suspect. Is what I'm saying. I mean, maybe there's some truth to it. It sounds really suspect because from what I've heard, ivermectin overdoses are ridiculous.
They are exceptionally rare.
Exceptionally rare. So the fact that they found 12 in one province, when I was found it almost impossible to find like a one that caused a death in the U.S. seems very suspect to me.
Yeah.
So just a note on ivermectin. It was demonized, and it was a complete. That was the biggest hoax ever. Because I remember, like in the I saw the documentary. I think it was Died Suddenly, where they actually like mentioned it. That ivermectin that they identified back when SARS like went around like crazy. They identified like what that they had already identified that ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine were probably the two best tools to use in case something like this ever comes back. So how was it that they banned like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine when they basically want people to not know that they already knew this? They knew from the get-go, and Fauci already knew that ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine were known to work against this kind of virus. Like this adds to the whole nonsense of them trying to demonize these drugs. It was a gigantic hoax. Total hoax. Anyway, we should move on, Stephen.
We should. We should. Okay. So, quickly mentioning this, it's well known now. COVID is man-made, former Wuhan-based scientist said. We've been saying this for a long time. Probably, I would say I was saying this ever since, probably June of 2020. When when it was a conspiracy to say that, oh, it probably lurked from the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that scientist went on Tucker's show, I was like, yeah, this is 100%. It came from the Wuhan lab.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's no way that it didn't. It's stupid to say that.
I think what this shows is that it is now acceptable enough to be able to say this out loud, that it's actually being published in like major publications. I think that's what's changed.
Mm-hmm.
Before it was like, it's like, oh, you can't even say that. Now it's like, no, thank goodness, you can actually talk about this honestly, because it's now fairly common knowledge that it came from a lab. Now you can't, like, the big thing is you can't prove it anymore, because in order to basically be able to verify all stuff, you would have to have documents and all sorts of like evidence from China. But the Chinese government completely eradicated all evidence of any kind that could trace it back to them. So you're left with, like, speculation and things that they can't really burn, which is basically like documents that are here, which is why like becomes like it's stayed in limbo. The reason it's in limbo is not because it's like, oh, it's because the Chinese government basically made it impossible to do a real investigation. So, and that goes back to the American government refusing to do any investigations back when it would have
made a difference.
Impossible. Made a difference. Yeah, totally on purpose.
Yep. But unfortunately, their government it's too far out to make a difference. But our government is moving in a negative direction, and we have no power to change it. So Trudeau bill amendment would result in the largest gun ban in Canadian history. Surprise last-minute amendment by the Liberals to Trudeau's pending gun control bill, initially pitched as a way to prevent the sale of Canadian handguns, would result in the largest gun prohibition in Canadian legislative history. The amendment, tabled by Liberal MP Paul Chiang, would criminalize a firearm that is a rifle or shotgun that is capable of discharging center-fire ammunition to a semi-automatic manner and that is designed to accept a detachable cartridge magazine with a capacity greater than 5 cartridges of the type for which the firearm was originally designed. In addition to this is a 478-page amendment that bans a number of other guns by name, including the SKS, a Soviet-designed rifle, with an estimated 20,000 owners that is frequently used in sport shooting. This flies in the face of what the Liberals said in 2019, that their government would not ban guns designed for hunting. Hunters, farmers, and law-abiding recreational gun owners will be treated with fairness and respect. Then Minister of Public Safety Bill Blair said at the time. One of the only semi-automatic guns not covered in the amendment is a shotgun that employs a tube magazine, primarily used for duck hunting. Due to it not having a detachable magazine, it avoids the ban. Well, stock up on those, because the government is coming. So because of their ubiquity, abandoning these semi-automatic duck guns would create a significant backlash, so it's not surprising that the Liberals have steered carefully clear of banning them. Canadians firearms expert Andrew Somerset told the National Post. So, however, a number of two-fed shotguns were listed by name in the 478-page amendment. So, we always knew that they weren't going to be coming just for hunters. I mean, just for the dangerous guns, just for the black scary ones, the handguns. They were coming for everything, because the Liberals do not want you to be able to defend yourselves, because the Liberals want to be able to take your rights away with reckless abandon. We always knew this was true. It's truly disgusting.
Like the Prime Minister of our country is probably the biggest disaster ever in Canadian history. I don't think Canada's going to recover after. Imagine, like, one man has done more damage to our country in one term of, like, his office than like dozens of prime ministers before him. He has single-handedly turned Canada into an absolute dystopian nightmare that I don't think we're going to come back from. This whole thing about the guns, it's so nakedly obvious that this has nothing to do with crime, and that it has everything to do with removing guns. Because, like, you have to remember, our dictator-in-chief, Prime Minister of Blackface, his whole MO is he wants to turn Canada into a socialist, communist, style dictatorship. And in order to do that, he has to basically criminalize law-abiding citizens and take away our guns because then we're easy to take over. This guy's following every Marxist playbook in the book, and he's already been criticized heavily, brutally by foreign governments, including at the UN when he went to calling him an absolute fascist dictator.
Yep.
And he doesn't care. He literally doesn't care. And at the we covered this I think last week at the Freedom Convoy Commission thing when he had to testify, he basically admitted like bluntly, he's like, yeah, I think protesting in order to change public policy is worrisome. And essentially he's like, well, I don't believe in protesting. Protests are basically, as long as you do your noise, I can ignore you safely. That's the kind of protest I want.
Yeah, we want you off in the corner. Like, basically, he wants for all protests that disagree with him to do what the cops wanted us to do when we went to that pro-choice rally. They want us to go to the other side of the road and not be heard or seen.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, we're not disruptive. We're here making a stand. We're not like the only threats of violence or anything like that was from them to us.
Yes.
And there was never any fear from any of them that we would assault them. But of course, pro-lifers are constantly vigilant because, you know, pro-abortees are fairly dangerous. And just like pro-abortees are dangerous, government officials, government authorities are dangerous.
Yeah,
when wielded by the wrong people.
You have to remember the Trudeau government is basically they're a Marxist government.
Yep.
They're not a liberal government. They're not classical. They're not anything. They're a Marxist government that's trying to orchestrate a slow and silent coup, a takeover. And they want to tear down Canada and turn it into a socialist style tyrannical dictatorship.
Yep.
That's what he wants.
And they succeeded for the most part.
And he's basically has just gotten the run of the show. It's pretty bad. So
yep. And of course, on top of this, unfortunately, the one of the major popular individuals who opposed him was Carey Price. Carey Price apologizes for timing of social media posts that criticize gun control.
Yeah.
He apologized Tuesday for wading into a politically sensitive debate over gun controls. This is his team's hometown was about to mark the anniversary of one of the worst mass shootings in Canadian history.
Yeah, so maybe we could just talk about this one rather than read the whole for time. So basically, for anybody who doesn't know, and like Carey Price, very, very famous goaltender with the Canadians, he basically went on social media and said, I don't agree with the Trudeau government's
like you're discriminating against hunters.
Against everyone who owns a gun. We're not criminals. We're regular people.
Yep.
Now that was trending on Twitter. Like, you know, I'm with Carey, or I stand with Carey.
Yep.
Because of course a lot of Canadians are like, yeah, we don't agree with this.
A lot of Canadians like law-abiding gun owners.
But like it's usually the case, what happened was the left basically found an angle to try to discredit him.
How dare you?
Like, you said this,
minimalize the victims.
Well, because there was
a Nicole Polytechnic shooting, which happened 33 years ago, I believe.
Yes, it was basically around the time of that event.
But it's like if they're going that far back, it's like you are willing to find any excuse to silence him.
Yeah, that's basically that. It's a very dishonest way of criticizing him. Now, you could actually argue that in reality, Justin Trudeau was wrong for producing this legislation now.
Yeah.
That's what you could argue. Okay, if anyone's to blame for the timing of this, it's Trudeau, not Carey Price. And of course, he apologized for the unfortunate, but he didn't apologize for his words, which I am absolutely for. But yeah, like our government basically acts like with impunity. They could not care less what anyone thinks. They've made up in their minds, we're doing this. I can't care less about what you want or what you think or anything. He acts like a narcissistic, like sociopath. So it's going to happen. And again, one of the things that happened with the Freedom Convoy that's discouraging is that even if you can find a way to basically like pressure him to change.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's like, nope, nothing's going to change. The only thing I will do is I will little boot and stomp on you.
Yep.
That's how a dictator responds to criticism to his policies.
Yep.
And that's our government.
That is indeed our government.
All right, take the last story.
Yep. And our government is only saying that they will get worse. Mm-hmm. So, finishing up today's stories, young woman says she will apply for assisted suicide when eligible. In a video posted to TikTok, a woman says she has bipolar disorder, which causes, of course, extreme mood swings of emotional highs and depressive lows. I've decided to go through with MAID. She said, I have to wait for it to be legalized in March, so that's 3 months. And the process takes likely 4 months. And so these are the mental illnesses that would qualify for MAID for sure as of March 2023, but depression, bipolar, personality disorders, PTSD, and schizo. If people with these mental illnesses can't afford their meds, therapy, then off they go. She said her friends and family to support her decision. I'll be spending my last 7 months doing the things that I love, eating good food, and spending as much time with family and friends. So, Liberal government already passed legislation expanding eligibility. We covered that before. And a recent video from the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms indicates that eligibility could expand for medically assisted suicide to include babies with disabilities, which is exactly what was suggested in Colombia yesterday. They suggest, well, okay, not babies. They suggested that children that had any level of pain, their parents could basically, if both parents and guardians agreed, then the government would consider euthanizing 6-year-olds.
Yep, it's like basically like a puppy.
Yep. Yeah. Like it does. Even if it had the video, I would not show the video because that would just be horrifying. But like this is what's happening. Mm-hmm. It's encouraging people because, and like there was another article from the Westphalian Times that we did not include, but it was fairly self-explanatory. Socialized medicine wants patients to kill themselves because that saves them a lot of money. Mm-hmm. Because then it's still a service, but it's a service that requires no long-term care. It's just one and done, and then out the door you go, and we still get paid from the government a large chunk of coin. Because you are a number, and your number is how much do you cost, and if your cost exceeds what they determine to be the benefit, then out you go. So if you're depressed, there was an article about a veteran who was trying to acquire a stair lift because she had to crawl down the stairs on her butt, or she had to shimmy down the stairs on her butt, and holding her wheelchair as she went down because she didn't have the funds to get a stair lift. And the government's like, well, it could take a long time to get a stair lift. Have you considered killing yourself? And then that created a massive issue and uproar around North America, at least, because this is not natural. This is despicable behavior from our government. It's despicable behavior, and it's only encouraging people that feel a little down and out. It's like, well, maybe killing myself is an easy way out. It's not as stigmatized as it used to be thanks to the government, and so now it's actually perceived as a good thing. Like every single year, we talked about this on Thursday, every single year, the number of people killing themselves through MAID has gone up substantially. And what was it? It was like 10,000 last year 10, compared to 300 gun deaths. And the government is going to like take away almost all the firearms in Canada, but they're only increasing the availability of medical assistance in dying because that saves the government money. So not only are their goals are saving money by killing the populace, and then the populace which will resist and fight back, they're going to disarm us. These are the steps that a dictatorship and a tyranny take before they fully take over and start imprisoning dissenters.
The prime minister, like, he basically said in an interview once that he's like, we're not like the Americans. You don't have a right to defend yourself. That's basically what he said. And
you
essentially,
don't have a right to self-defense with a gun. And it's like
what he implied is that, oh, if your life is in danger, call the cops. I'm
good
like,
luck.
Interesting, like, like logic. Why don't you do that? It's like, oh, I'm the prime minister. I get my private security.
I have private
like,
security.
Oh,
I don't
so
have
basically
to rely on the police.
the only people who have the right to defend themselves and to have private protection are the
establishment elite.
That is basically what they're saying. But the funny thing is about the euthanasia law is that what people don't realize, what they're doing on purpose is they are intentionally removing benefits and removing all sorts of helps from people who desperately need them, because they can say, well, we don't have to offer you these anymore because now there's an option for you, which is basically letting us kill you. And this is not like even speculation. I've listened to people who are deep in this trench, who are fighting the good fight, who are advocating and trying to like speak reason to Parliament. And they basically said, this is not even just like a guess of what might happen. This is happening. People are literally like the government is intentionally saying, oh, good, we don't have to spend money to help people. Actually, a story I heard, or I read today, you know that story we covered last week, Stephen, about that Simon's ad?
Yep.
First of all, Simon's has removed that from YouTube.
Yep.
You know, because they got a lot of embarrassment. But more than that, there was an article that came out that said people who know the lady who died said she didn't actually want to die. She just said, I don't have access to all the supports that I need in order to live a decent life. And so death was the only viable option for her. And she just embraced it. But people around her said, like, no, she didn't want to die. That was not her goal. It was the only option given to her, which, funny enough, the same people who advocate for abortion are the same people that say abortion is your only choice.
Yeah.
And anybody who says that there's another choice are evil and wicked. And that was one of the stories we were going to cover is Chrystia Freeland basically said that, like, the pregnancy care centers are evil because they actually had the audacity to tell women who are pregnant that there may be other options. It's like, how dare you tell them that there's other options other than abortion? Like, this is how this is how they work.
Yeah.
This is a death cult, by the way. This is a cult of people who care nothing for human life or human suffering. And that is the people that are in charge.
Yep.
These are people who care nothing about human life. Couldn't care less. Justin Trudeau is so heartless. He could not care less if people died because of any of his policies. He couldn't care less.
No.
I don't think he's a sociopath. I think he's a psychopath.
No.
Because I remember watching the one of the questions they asked him during one of the question periods in the convoy thing. They asked him, like, the lady literally listed several examples, several testimonies of people who told their heartbreaking stories about how Trudeau's policies had ruined their lives and are making them desperate.
Yep.
And he responded, but like, oh yeah. Well, I also heard stories about people who died because they thought the vaccines didn't work. And it's like, oh, my heart went out. And if only I'd done more to force people to have vaccines. That is how tone deaf this man is. He's a psychopath. We have a psychopath in charge of our government.
Yep, we do.
So, yeah.
Alrighty. So that's where we're going to end today's show. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I understand there was not any live commentary because nobody knew we were going to go live. This was entirely a test. And it seemed to have worked and gone off without a hitch. So hopefully everything should be good to go Thursday. Okay. And Thursday, I think we're going to try and go back to the streaming live on all three platforms. And hopefully that goes well.
Cross them fingers.
Yep. Crossing them fingers. And hopefully this is the end of our tech issues and we can go back to focusing on content instead of trying to make excuses for software failures. So, that being said, if you're following on the video later and watching on our video content that we will post of the recording on BitChute, YouTube, Rumble, or YouTube, then like, share, comment, subscribe. You know the deal. Tell us how we're doing. If you want to be featured on an episode or join us to talk about a segment, let us know. We'll see what we can do. If you're following us on our text platforms such as Facebook, Getter, Twitter, and Parler, then you know how to use those platforms. Do the same thing as I just said for video content. But regardless of what platform you're on, share these videos so that they get around, so that people can be aware of the truth, because that is part of why we exist. Because here at the Shrewd Dudes Podcast, we like to remind you, why be rude when you can be shrewd?
Indeed.
Have a great couple nights, everybody. We will see you on Thursday for our normal live stream. So until then, have a great couple nights. And as always, God bless.